Tonight, massacre in Mumbai, India's largest city. Terrorists stage a series of coordinated attacks, apparently aimed at American and British tourists. Dozens of people are reported dead as the attackers seize 2 luxury hotels. I'm Maggie Rodriguez. Also tonight, the holiday season's here, but the skies are less crowded, and the fear is the stores will be too. Prosecutors say her online taunts drove a young teenager to suicide. Tonight, what the jury said. And on the road, then and again, with the self-proclaimed king of the street.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening. Katie is off tonight. We begin with a mass terror attack in India's largest city, Mumbai. Teams of gunmen staged coordinated attacks and took hostages at luxury hotels, a restaurant, and a train station. According to witnesses, the targets were American and British tourists. Out on the street, bystanders dove for cover as shots rang out. Indian officials say at least 78 people were killed, nationalities not known, at least 200 others injured. The police say they killed 4 gunmen and captured 9 others. Mumbai, which used to be known as Bombay, is home to nearly 12 million people. It is the financial capital of India and has been hit repeatedly by terror attacks, many of them blamed on Muslim extremists. Mark Phillips begins our coverage of this still developing story.
At least one of the attack sites was still ablaze hours after the original assault as gunfights continued between Indian security forces and militants. The Indian metropolis of Mumbai has seen violence before, but these attacks appear to have been coordinated and directed at landmarks popular with foreigners. Witnesses, some of whom escaped in the chaos of the attacks, say men stormed into some of the city's most popular hotels with automatic weapons and grenades, and they seemed to be specifically looking for Westerners.
There was a lot of smoke and I guess there were bombs of some sort, yeah. They wanted foreigners because they were asking for British or American passports.
Not just hotels, but at least 7 separate locations in the center of the city were attacked, including a train station and a popular restaurant. Indian news agencies say a previously unknown Islamic militant group calling itself the Deccan Mujahideen claimed responsibility. But terror experts say this attack bore the hallmarks of a group with considerable experience and resources.
This is not your average kind of terrorist attack with one soft target. It's several soft targets, and including a police station, which is actually a medium target.
The attackers herded their hostages onto upper floors of at least 2 of the hotels. Indian anti-terror police and later detachments of the Indian Army moved in. 2 of India's top anti-terror police were reported to have been among those killed in the battles that followed the original attacks. Violence of this sort in India is often connected to the conflict with Pakistan over the disputed state of Kashmir. But there may have been another, broader dimension to these attacks.
It suggests that they have a plan. It suggests that they know who they want to attack. They have specific nations in mind, in this case the obvious ones of the UK and the US.
In the chaos of these attacks, it's impossible to know the number of hostages which might have been involved or the final casualty tolls as a result of the gunfights which followed in the hotels. What we do know is that in the scale of these attacks, in their coordination, and in the targets they chose, including human targets, violence in the region has been brought to a new and even more worrying level. Maggie?
Mark Phillips in London. Thank you, Mark. Joining me now on the telephone from Mumbai is Philip Badge, who was in one of the hotels that was attacked. Philip, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Are you out of harm's way right now?
I think so. About 200 metres away from the Oberoi Hotel, and it currently seems reasonably calm.
How did you get away?
Down the fire escape. I was on the 19th floor. There was a number of explosions going on. I'd basically stayed in the room until smoke started pouring in, at which point I decided it was time to get out of there.
What did you see and hear all around you when this was happening?
There wasn't a lot of noise in the hotel apart from the explosions. Everything went very quiet. When I did come out of the room, everything was dark. There was smoke everywhere. It was just a matter of feeling my way to get to the fire escape and then down. Everything was very badly lit.
Did you have any indication as it was happening that this was a terrorist attack? Was that your instinct?
No idea what it was, in fairness. Totally new to it.
And now that you know the details, how do you feel?
It's just horrific. I mean, we're sitting here, out in the open air, and you can hear the explosions not only coming from the hotel we were in, but actually all around the city. It's quite scary.
Thank you so much, Philip Badge.
Thank you.
President Bush and President-elect Obama have both condemned the attacks and the loss of life in Mumbai. Bob Orr is in Washington tonight. And Bob, we heard Mark Phillips report that a little-known terror group has claimed responsibility. What information do you have?
Well, Maggie, we've been talking to U.S. officials all afternoon, and they say, frankly, they do not know who's behind the attacks. But they point out there's no shortage of suspects, ranging from Islamic extremists on the one hand to separatists on the other. And at the moment, nobody can be ruled out. Now, the group you mentioned taking responsibility calls itself the Deccan Mujahideen. That is not a name, though, that any terror officials here have heard before today. We have to say the attacks bear some frightening hallmarks of al-Qaeda, a number of attackers working across multiple targets simultaneously, resulting in a high death count. But al-Qaeda has not been known in the past for taking living hostages and inviting police confrontations. Now, while al-Qaeda has shown a clear preference for suicide missions and improvised explosive devices, we also have to point out today's attackers used assault weapons and grenades. That's different, Maggie.
And Bob, India and specifically Mumbai are no strangers to violent terror attacks.
Well, sadly, that's right. We looked back, and it turns out since 2003, more than 600 people have been killed. The deadliest attack, you see pictures here, happened in July 2006. Improvised explosive devices detonated in 7 different locations. They targeted trains, transit stations. More than 200 people were killed. Now, that attack was blamed at the time on Islamist extremists. More recent attacks, including a number this year, more than a half dozen, have been traced to militants tied to the ongoing conflict on Kashmir. That's a disputed border region that Mark Phillips talked about between Pakistan and India. The targets today that were hit, hotels, restaurants, and a hospital, though, are classic soft targets, right in the middle of a bustling financial center in a city of more than 12 million people. Officials say those locations very popular with foreigners, but also are popular with tourists. And the attacks were clearly meant to spread fear among all of those people. Now, President Bush, who's in Camp David for the holiday weekend, has been briefed. He's being updated continuously. A spokesman for the National Security Council tells us so far the U.S. has not heard of any Americans being held hostage. Maggie?
Bob Orr in Washington. Thank you, Bob. Here at home, meantime, police are beefing up security for mass transit in and around New York City. The FBI and Homeland Security warned today that al-Qaeda terrorists may have discussed bombing the suburban rail system. Sources tell CBS News there's no reason to believe this alleged plot ever got beyond talk, but officials say they put out the warning out of concern that such an attack could come during the holiday season. This is, of course, the start of the holiday travel season, but this year, things are a little different. Cheryl Atkinson is at Dulles Airport outside Washington. Good evening, Cheryl.
Good evening, Maggie. The skies and roads are less traveled than usual. With the struggling economy, we're actually seeing the first decline in holiday Thanksgiving travel since 2002.
Passengers in Detroit were surprised to find a near-empty airport this morning.
It's kind of empty, but I mean, it's still people traveling.
Not surprised that a lot of people aren't flying, no, because the economy is very, very bad.
At the FAA's Air Traffic Command Center in Herndon, Virginia, every red dot is a plane in the sky. And though it may look as busy as ever, there aren't as many passengers in the air.
Last year was very busy. For some reason, the economy was better, obviously. So we really had to get into some programs to mitigate delays there. But this is by far going to be probably the best Thanksgiving we've had in the 4 years that I've been here.
On the ground in Chicago,
I'm shocked. This is the easiest Thanksgiving we've ever had. It's been a dream. It's been easy.
Even a last-minute drop in airline ticket prices didn't help the industry much. AAA projects 4.54 million people will take to the skies this holiday weekend, 350,000 fewer than last year. And despite the recent decline in gas prices, the number of Americans traveling by car is also expected to be down by 400,000.
I don't think people are going out of town this year. I think they're just going to kind of work together and do some potluck and stay home and pray to God they keep their houses.
In all, some 600,000 fewer people are making that annual Thanksgiving pilgrimage this year.
Even with fewer travelers, though, you might have a rougher time getting back home. The forecast calls for rain and snow to move in by Sunday, especially in the east. And that almost always, Maggie, means delays.
Great. I'm traveling tomorrow. Good to know. Cheryl Atkinson.
Good luck.
Thank you. The slow travel is one, and here are other signs of the economic slowdown in this country. The government reported today that sales of new homes fell sharply in October. They were selling, in fact, at the slowest pace in nearly 18 years. And consumer spending, the driving force of the economy, plunged 1%, the biggest drop since 9/11. Meanwhile, President-elect Obama said help is on the way as he held his third news briefing on the economy in 3 days. He said he's putting together a panel of outside economic advisors to be led by a former Fed chairman. Dean Reynolds in Chicago has the latest on the transition.
The president-elect met some of his most ardent fans today, stopping at a Chicago grade school for a brief respite from the pressing problem of the national economy. It's an economy whose effects were in plain sight, though, a few feet away from the applause in the school parking lot outside, where, with help from the Obama family, a Chicago food bank distributed Thanksgiving meals to increasingly long lines of the needy.
The number of families coming in are up 33%. The number of people who are getting food this year is up 33%.
The trip gave Obama a first-hand look at the problem he's been elected to solve, and it's why all this week he's sought to project confidence in the face of the storm.
People should understand that help is on the way.
Today, Obama added to his economic team, naming 81-year-old Paul Volcker, a legendary former Federal Reserve chairman, to lead a panel of outside advisors. Volcker, Timothy Geithner as Treasury Secretary, and Lawrence Summers at the National Economic Council all hail from previous Democratic administrations. And while some critics say that undermines Obama's call for real change, the man himself disagreed.
But understand where the vision for change comes from first and foremost. It comes from me.
Obama will turn to national security next week when he's expected to unveil Hillary Clinton as his new Secretary of State and Robert Gates as his holdover choice at the Pentagon. But today, at least, Obama was mum.
We're not talking about my cabinet because I haven't made those appointments yet.
But as events in India today so vividly show, national security is every bit as important as the economy among the issues that Barack Obama will soon confront. Maggie?
Dean Reynolds, thank you very much. This evening, Barbara Bush, the former First Lady, is in the hospital in Houston, Texas. She had surgery overnight to repair a perforated ulcer. Mrs. Bush is 83. Her family says she's doing well and should be going home next week. Coming up on the CBS Evening News, online bullying. A verdict today in the case of a MySpace hoax linked to a young girl's death. The jury has spoken in a landmark online bullying case. Federal prosecutors argued that a Missouri woman's mean-spirited taunts led a young girl to commit suicide, but they didn't get the verdict they wanted. Here's John Blackstone.
The accusations against Lori Drew made her the most notorious cyberbully in the short history of the Internet, blamed for the suicide of 13-year-old Megan Meyer. Prosecutors charged that Drew created a fake profile of a teenage boy on MySpace and used it to torment Meyer, who hanged herself in her own bedroom. Today, though, a jury convicted Drew of only the least serious charges, 3 misdemeanors for improperly accessing the MySpace social networking site.
This is the first time in the nation that this particular charge has been charged in this manner against a social networking organization.
Legal experts say the government's use of anti-computer hacking laws seem to stretch the law.
The jury is telling the prosecutor, you went too far. Lori Drew may be guilty of doing bad things with a computer, but she certainly isn't guilty of a felony involving the suicide of this young woman.
Still, Tina Meyer, the mother of the young victim, says the verdict sends a message to other cyberbullies.
That's what my hope is, that if nothing else, the story gets out to other people, and people think about what they do before they get on the internet. They start harassing other people.
Even on the misdemeanor charges, Drew, 49, could be sentenced to as much as 3 years in prison. Her attorney says she will appeal. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
The world's most famous luxury cruise ship sailed into retirement today. After 40 years and 6 million miles at sea, the Queen Elizabeth II docked at the Persian Gulf port of Dubai. The ship was sold last year to a company controlled by the United Arab Emirates. It plans to turn the QE2 into a floating luxury hotel. If you were in charge of buying the food for Thanksgiving, you know how expensive it is, and it may get worse. The government is now predicting food prices will rise 4% next year. Here's Cynthia Bowers.
We're getting green peppers, bud, remember?
For Sarah Randall, grocery shopping used to be about what to put in her cart. Now it's about deciding what to keep out.
When I check out, it's definitely much more expensive than it used to be.
Grocery prices started going up last year when corn, wheat, and other commodities shot to record highs. Food manufacturers blamed the ethanol industry's use of food for fuel. Now ethanol supporters are firing back.
Corn is back down 50% lower where it was just 5 months ago. So why hasn't the price of food come down?
Because even though corn is now selling for less than half what it did in June, the Thanksgiving turkey that fed on that corn cost you 8% more per pound. The wheat baked into the dinner rolls is down 60%, but the rolls are up 16%. And the soybeans in your pumpkin pie crust down 47% since summer, but your cost is 9% more. Experts say that's because grocery pricing is about much more than just commodities.
Raw commodity costs represent about 20% of the total food bill at the grocery store. The other 80% represents all the other costs that are involved in getting food from the farm to the grocery store.
One regional grocery chain, Wegmans, is eating into its own profits by cutting prices 5% throughout the store.
Happy Thanksgiving!
It's a good thing to do for this time of the year for everyone.
Even if food prices do come down over the next few months, there is more heartburn on the horizon. The USDA is predicting prices will go up another 5% next year. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Chicago.
This next story could be called Lost and Found in Space. Last week, an astronaut lost a tool bag while doing repairs on the space station. Well, it has been found. Did you see it? It's streaked by there, so we're going to put it in slow motion for you. There it is, highlighted. An amateur astronomer in Canada took this video of the tool bag as it went by at a mere 1,800 miles an hour. Eventually, it's expected to burn up when it re-enters Earth's atmosphere. Coming up next, Steve Hartman updates a Charles Kuralt classic, The Manic Messenger. Has age slowed him down? We'll find out in a moment. Finally tonight, the late, great Charles Kuralt traveled many a road during his years here at CBS News. Perhaps none more dangerous than the road also traveled by a speedy young messenger on a bicycle. Steve Hartman managed to catch up with him all these years later. So here now are Steve and Charles on the road again.
In a city known for crazy drivers, you're about to meet the craziest. A guy who cheats death by this much. Just like he did when Charles Kuralt met him 23 years ago.
You don't stop for red lights.
I don't stop for red lights.
You don't stop for pedestrians.
I go against traffic, right? People go all day long, I hear that.
At 24, David Leopold is an outlaw legend, the fastest and the flashiest of Manhattan Island's last romantic adventurers, the bicycle messenger.
Hey, move over!
He passes trucks, he passes buses, he passes mounted policemen as if they were standing still, and all taxicabs.
I can ride between objects that leave me 1.5 inches on each side. It's so technical, you know, it's like a surgeon's hand.
Given this guy's cockiness and dare-devil-may-care attitude,
Come on, man!
I thought for sure he'd be roadkill by now.
It is a dangerous job.
And yet,
go ahead.
Here he is.
Only the strong survive.
Now, at 47, he's got one gray hair for every near-death experience. The other really noticeable change is, if you strap a camera on him today, you'll see something in his riding that definitely wasn't there in the Kuralt footage. an actual modicum of common sense. Now David even stops for baby carriages.
I'm cautious, yes, because I want my children to have a father and my wife to have a husband.
Those dependents, those beautiful dependents, have not only made David a safer biker, they've made him a mostly behind-a-desk biker. Only riding he does now is to work. Today, David owns his own messenger service called Cavalry Couriers. It's one of the few remaining messenger services in the city. Apparently, ever since the fax machine came out, business has been going downhill. Half of him wonders if the profession will even be around by the time his son can ride.
Ian does have it in his blood, I can see it.
While the other half hopes it won't. If he came to you and said, I want to be just like you, Dad.
You know what I would think? I would think I've done something wrong as a dad.
But David says if his son insists, he hopes he does it for the right reason. A reason Charles Kuralt summed up eloquently, as always.
David's in it for the joy of passing everything that moves on the island of Manhattan, and of doing this one thing better than anybody else on the planet Earth.
I'm the king of the street.
Charles Kuralt.
I'm probably no longer king of the streets, but...
And Steve Hartman.
Give my best shot.
On the road.
Again. In New York.
And that does it for the CBS Evening News tonight. For Katie Couric, I'm Maggie Rodriguez. Thanks for watching. I will see you first thing Thanksgiving morning on The Early Show. Have a great holiday. Good night.